the development and proliferation of more advanced military technologies by other nations. That means that we are entering an era where American dominance on the seas, in the skies, and in space can no longer be taken for granted. Second, defense spending is not expected to reach the levels projected in the 5-year budget plan submitted by the President last year. Given these realities, we must now adapt, innovate, and make difficult decisions to ensure that our military remains ready and capable, maintaining its technological edge over all potential adversaries. However, as a consequence of large budget cuts, our future force will assume additional risks in certain areas.
All right, folks, that's Chuck Hagel from yesterday announcing the cutting of the number of troops in the U.S. Army, for instance, back to pre-World War II levels. Joining us right now to talk about all that and much more is our friend John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and American Enterprise Institute Senior Fellow, Fox News contributor. Hello, sir.
Hello, Steve. Glad to be with you.
Always great to talk to you. Okay, your take on this, and I guess I'm correct in assuming that even though this is what they envision, they can't do it without Congress, correct?
Yeah, this is the budget they're proposing. I mean, if you listen to Hagel's press conference yesterday, and the part you played is a good example of it, he made a very strong case to increase the defense budget, talking about additional risks and threats and uncertainties and demands on the American military. And then he proceeded to say, and this is the most revealing thing at all, that basically the Pentagon matched our strategy to the budget number they were given. So I think that any professional military will do what they are told to do. If they're told their budget number is $496 billion, that they will do the best they can to devise a military within that limit. But it is a completely political, ideological decision by the President. He wants to downsize the military, quite apart from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He wants to leave his successors with a smaller American military, and he wants to spend more money on welfare programs at home. That is what Obama said in the 2008 campaign, that he wanted to fundamentally transform America, and this military budget is part of that exercise.
You know, we're so used to using the phrase, oh, that's not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I think you've hit right on it. He went on to, he talked about the greater threats we're facing, how there are bigger challenges, and then, by the way, we're cutting.
Well, it's not only now a question of reducing our military capabilities in this budget. Obama has been at this for 5 years. We have cut, leaving the cost of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan out of this. We've already cut $1 trillion from the defense budget in the last 5 years. And these cuts, which now take us, as even the mainstream media have reported, to an army that's the same size as the American Army in 1940, will leave us not only weaker in terms of capabilities, we are reducing the capacity of the United States to deter and dissuade adversaries from making threats toward us in the first place. You know, the best war is the war that's never fought.
Right.
And the way you prevent wars from being fought is through a demonstration of strength, so that the adversary says, I'm not even going to think about going there. As the U.S. military is downsized, our adversaries are encouraged to think that they can take risky, belligerent actions and get away with it.
So, in the words of former Vice President Dick Cheney, absolutely dangerous, radical, and just devastating. Agree with all that? Care to add any more?
No, I think that's a good start. And you know, what we need now in Congress and around the nation, we need a debate, not just on this budget, although the budget should be the starting point. We need a debate on whether we want a declining, withdrawing, less powerful, less assertive, less capable United States. Because that's the direction the President's moving in. I think that's what he's doing for purely ideological reasons. He doesn't want to say it, but that's what this budget is all about.
Mr. Ambassador, the President today, it was reported, asked the Pentagon for a plan for a complete withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan by the end of the year amid this dispute over the security pact with Afghanistan. Reportedly, he has spoken with Ahmad Karzai, but he's also leaving open the possibility that American troops will remain past 2014. What do you make of this?
Well, I think this really reveals what the president has wanted to do all along, and he's going to be perfectly comfortable if American forces and what's left of the NATO forces there do, in fact, all withdraw by the end of this year. He's following the same game plan that he did in Iraq, where he said, yes, we're trying to negotiate a status of forces agreement, but he didn't do what was necessary to reach agreement with Iraq, which many senators who visited were saying they wanted to do, because ultimately what Obama wanted was to get out of Iraq entirely. And the problems of negotiating a status of forces agreement were simply an excuse, a pretext, so that when they couldn't reach agreement, because he didn't try, then he could say, well, I guess we've got to withdraw entirely. And I think we're seeing exactly the same thing in Afghanistan. I think the decision will wait the outcome of the April presidential elections there. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if, just as in Iraq, it turns out we can't negotiate an agreement that would keep our people there, and by the end of this year, they've all been withdrawn.
All right. Could you explain to me, sir, what happened in Egypt yesterday? Why did the interim government, the acting prime minister and his cabinet, why did they resign? Should we be concerned? Is this in any way, shape, or form any kind of victory for those who would like to see the Muslim Brotherhood brought back into the mix?
I don't think so. I found it somewhat unusual, but the explanation that I think makes the most sense is that it was a political move by General el-Sisi, that obviously with the turmoil in Egypt really going on for 3 years now, and the uncertainty that remains about the future political direction of the country, the economy's in the tank. There's just no doubt about it. And the speculation is that el-Sisi wanted to get out of a position of responsibility where anybody could blame him for the problems of the economy and thus not interfere with his race for the presidency. Now, I'm not sure anybody's going to be deceived at who's in charge in Egypt, but at least it gives him a colorable political argument that the continued terrible state of the Egyptian economy is not his responsibility, at least until he's elected president.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't pick your brain a little bit on where you see the situation in the Ukraine going, how you see it settling itself out. I mean, is it possible to have the country, you know, those supporting Russia go east and those supporting Western Europe go west without a bloody civil war? And how would Russia react to such a thing?
Well, I think it's possible that ultimately Ukraine would split, but I think we're a long way from that point now. I think for their various reasons, pro-Russian Ukrainians and Vladimir Putin on the one hand, and Ukrainians who want a closer relationship with the West on the other, both think that they can ultimately prevail, and they see it as in their interest to keep the country together. I think the split scenario comes up only when one side or the other concludes they have no chance of prevailing in a political context, in an electoral context, and they decide it's unacceptable to live with the other side on top. Then I think that some kind of partition becomes more of a possibility, but I don't think we're there yet. I don't see the Russians sending troops in yet. Although if things deteriorate and the Russian government really fears a government in Kiev that's hostile to Russian interests, then I don't think you can rule it out, at least for the Russians to carve off the Crimea from the Ukraine because of the Russian military bases there.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, always great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Steve. Glad to be with you.
My pleasure. That's the one and only John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, and, of course, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Fox News analyst, all that right here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Very, very interesting take on all of the issues, and that's what struck everybody. I think, you know, here's I think we mentioned yesterday, here's Chuck Hagel saying, the threats have increased, we have more challenges than ever, we got to modernize, we got to do this, but here we're cutting. And I believe that's mutually exclusive. Can't do both. That's my humble opinion. And where is my humble opinion being humbled and given? Right here on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television.